How does the federal court ruling last week in the Ripple case impact your stance toward digital asset regulation? Does it inject urgency into the need for federal legislation to clarify regulatory oversight of this industry?
Look, our mission remains exactly what I spoke about earlier, about investor protection, promoting capital formation, and the markets in the middle. This is a recent decision, just a handful of days ago. We were pleased from that decision, recognizing the importance of protecting investors on the institutional investors in that, and that the court movement with regard to fair notice, and while disappointed on what they said about retail investors, we're still looking at it and assessing that opinion.
What's up, guys? Mickle here, and right there you have Gary Gensler commenting on what just happened in the Ripple SEC case, and as you might have noticed, he calls it the judge's opinion. Well, in this video, I want to break down whether or not this changes my thoughts on Gary Gensler appealing this case. I have some pretty interesting thoughts on exactly how that would play out, and whether or not that would kill XRP clarity in the United States in the short term. But towards the end of the video, I actually want to talk about a pretty interesting document that just got filed in the case, where Judge Netburn is asking both parties to get together and settle the resting matters in this case. In this video, I want to break down whether or not I think there will be a settlement. Make sure to stick around for that. You are not going to want to miss it. Like always, your support means so much to this channel. If you want to see more videos just like this, make sure to take a quick second to like this video and subscribe to my channel. It's really going to help me out so much. Also, if you ever need a good place to buy some XRP or the Flare token, make sure to check out my favorite exchange Uphold down in the description of this video. With that said though, let's jump right into it, and I hope you guys enjoy the content. So as you guys could hear in the intro, Gary Gensler is clearly not very happy about the court's decision in the Ripple SEC case. You can tell by how much he's stuttering, how many ums he's throwing in there. He's trying to look for wins in this decision. He just can't find any. Essentially, the SEC tried to twist the current law and say that XRP itself, the digital asset, is the security, and that was completely shot down in Judge Torres' ruling. Now, this is one of the most important things we need to understand, because while the SEC did get a win on Ripple's institutional sales, that win is minuscule. At the end of the day, Ripple doesn't even need to sell XRP directly to institutions for its business. Think about something like Liquidity Hub. In Liquidity Hub, Ripple sells XRP to exchanges, and then those exchanges distribute XRP. In that manner, essentially, Ripple is not directly selling XRP to anyone, and that completely gets around their institutional sales. So essentially, what the SEC won on is minuscule. And even if Ripple did one day have to register XRP for institutional transactions, that's just a registration process. It's not saying XRP itself is the security, which is impossible to do. It's just Ripple saying, hey, SEC, here's our form saying that we just sent this much XRP to Bank of America. So the SEC really didn't get a win here. They just got a very small subset of transactions that Ripple is now supposed to register, but could probably get around in most cases in the future. Now, the real issue for Gary Gensler going forward is, one, that he really didn't get any jurisdiction on the secondary market, and as he even states in this clip, he's disappointed that the court didn't say anything about those secondary transactions. But the bigger issue for him is that Judge Torres literally said, as a matter of law, XRP is not the security. This is the biggest issue for Gary Gensler, because he cannot take this to a Second Circuit now and say, actually, we think the law is wrong, XRP is the security. There was no opinion there. Since how he was created, the asset itself has never been the security. So if Gary Gensler wants to take this to the Second Circuit, he's really just going to have to go after other transactions by Ripple, but not the asset itself. And this is why I think this is a much bigger win than many people understand. Judge Torres made it clear that the SEC was wrong on the law, and this is something she didn't have to do. But she went out of her way to show the SEC, you're not using Howey right, you can appeal what you think transactions should be registered, but XRP itself will never be the security. Now, that was the black swan event most of us were worried about. If Judge Torres was just going to rubber stamp anything the SEC was saying and say, you know what, you're the SEC, we'll make up new law for you, XRP is the security. That didn't happen, and that's the SEC's biggest problem going forward. Now, some people are asking, and I think it's a reasonable question, is what happens if the SEC does appeal? Is XRP going to be back in limbo in the meantime? And the answer to that is no. The appeal process is going to take 2 to 3 years, and in that time period, Judge Torres's ruling is the law. So even if the SEC was to appeal this decision, they have the burden of proof to actually prove that the judge was wrong. Until then, the judge is right, and the SEC is just salty about what happened. But if the SEC appeals this decision, it doesn't mean instantaneously overnight we're back to no clarity. It means we have clarity until the SEC is proven right. And like I said, the most important thing we need to understand about all of this is the SEC is going to have a very hard time going back to their statement that XRP is the security. This was already a very, very questionable argument in the first case we saw, but the only reason they were able to make it is because they kind of disguised it in their other arguments. But what we saw in the case is that Judge Torres brought this issue to the forefront and shot the SEC down on it. So in an appeal, the SEC isn't going to come out and say, oh, well, we think XRP is the security, because it is so obvious based on anyone's interpretation of the Howey test, that assessment is wrong on its face. So the SEC's biggest issue here is there really isn't much to appeal. They would just be trying to get more of Ripple's transactions of XRP, and it's really hard to say whether or not that's going to be worth it for them over the long run. In my opinion, the SEC has a much better chance of actually winning on the exchange front, and it's really going to come down to how many resources the SEC wants to dedicate to a case they're already getting a beatdown in. Now, with all that said, based on how Gary Gensler was talking in that clip, he essentially said it's just one judge's opinion. So maybe the SEC is just going to be spiteful and try to appeal this. I just don't really know where that gets them in the long run. Now, what I think is a much better move by the SEC would actually just be to settle the case and actually grab some wins in a settlement. What we saw was earlier today, Judge Torres actually handed over a document to Judge Netburn, asking Judge Netburn to ask both parties to get together and agree on 3 dates to talk about a settlement. Now, it's important to note that the parties don't have to get together on 3 dates and talk about a settlement. It's up to them whether or not they want to. But what we do know is there is an incentive on both sides to actually settle this case. What we know is Ripple just wants to be done with this thing. They want to figure out how can we operate our business in the United States now that we know that XRP itself is not a security. What do you want us to register? What don't we have to register? And how do we move forward in a compliant manner? On the other side of this, the SEC just took a humiliating loss. Just look how Gary Gensler was talking in that clip. He has lost all his confidence. He used to come out and immediately say all these assets are securities. Now he can't even make that statement because Judge Torres shot the SEC down so hard. The SEC is desperately looking for a win here. They got a small win, but they want more. What they can get out of this settlement is more registration of XRP from Ripple. And like I said earlier, this does not mean XRP is a security of Ripple. That is the important part to understand. It doesn't have to be though. Ripple could still register XRP for different sales, and the SEC could involve themselves in these transactions. In my opinion, this is going to be the SEC's best shot of walking out of this case with a win. When the SEC first announced that, oh, we are happy with the decision by the judge in this case, almost the entire cryptocurrency community was laughing in their face. No one believed it because they lost so big. But if the SEC can actually get a settlement that leans in their favor, they could actually come out and legitimately say, hey, we got a win on this front, and this front. And honestly, we never actually thought XRP was going to be the security. We were just using that as leverage. We really just wanted Ripple to register these sales. Now, the SEC really could make that look like a win, and that would be massive for them, and it would save a lot of face in the agency. Now, I think a lot of what I said is probably the logical thing for the SEC to do. I think it would make them look the best. They would get out looking like, hey, we actually gave this industry clarity, and we would have gotten to the logical court decision through this entire process. But like we have seen over the last couple months, the SEC rarely does the logical thing. Instead, they like to do things that simply attack the industry. They like to try to hurt retail investors, so maybe that scenario I just laid out for you is just a little too logical. Either way though, I think it's pretty interesting exactly where we find ourselves right now. Ripple won big on the main issue. XRP is not a security, and the SEC got a minuscule win saying, hey Ripple, if you want to send XRP to an institution, make sure you tell us. That is not what the SEC is looking for, and the SEC just doesn't have a lot of room to appeal the main thing they wanted, XRP being the security. So going forward, the SEC is going to have a tough choice to make. Do they get together with Ripple, figure out how they can paint this decision as a win, maybe get more of Ripple's sales registered and admit XRP is not the security, or do they appeal this decision and make an even bigger mess of the situation? Now, based on everything I have seen, it really doesn't matter if the SEC does appeal this or they don't. If they go to the Supreme Court, they're losing anyway. No judge is going to agree with the SEC's absurd theory that XRP is the security, so you just have to think back and ask, what is the SEC actually appealing? Now, I want to say quickly, if Judge Torres didn't actually rule on XRP not being the security and making that explicitly clear in her ruling, we might be in a situation where the SEC had a legitimate chance to actually sneak that into the appeal. But because she made that so rock solid and so clear, it is going to be impossible for another judge to say, actually, we agree with going against the law and saying the asset is the security. John D. and Jeremy Hogan commented on this as well, and that is why we were so lucky to get Judge Torres. She shot down the black swan for XRP, labeling XRP the security, and since day one, Ripple has been saying, we will settle this case, we will register whatever the SEC wants, as long as they come out and say XRP is not the security. No matter what happens in the future, whether we have appeals, whether we have a settlement, the important thing we need to understand is XRP is never going to be the security, and that means XRP holders will always win in the long run. Maybe we have to go through some more BS, or maybe the SEC finally comes to their senses and they agree on how to let this industry prosper. The important part is Judge Torres took the black swan off the table, and that's why we should all be extremely happy we got her. She did not have to do that. She went out of her way to make sure the SEC could not push forward this absurd theory, and honestly, the SEC didn't even ask for her to rule on this. She did it herself because she understood there should never be a scenario in which XRP is the security, and whether or not Ripple and the SEC want to fight some more over which sales Ripple should register, that's for another day. For now, they can either get together, hash it out, or they can go to the Second Circuit, but we are not going to reinvent the law because the SEC wants control over an industry. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this update. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. It really does mean so much. And for now, Mickle out.